Hello, I'm Kahura, and these are 10 things you need to know about New Zealand. In this video, I will debunk a few common beliefs, talk a little bit about our basic history, and go over some unique things that my country has to offer. First off, New Zealand is a real place. Before you ask, no, I'm not a hobbit. Now, to a lot of you watching, that statement is probably ridiculous. But if you type into Google, "Is New Zealand?" the second most searched term is New Zealand real? 1,800 years ago, our Mount Taupo erupted in the North Island, and that was heard in China. So people knew about New Zealand in one way or another 1,100 years before it was even found. In our age of the internet and international knowledge, people still ask if my country is real. By the way, the explosion was so massive that the only thing left of the mountain was a giant lake. Yikes. Most people watching this video probably know about New Zealand from our film industry, from The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, yada yada, or from our sports presence, with rugby in particular. I'm here today to show you plenty of other reasons that the world should know about New Zealand. Number 2. We are not Australia. In fact, New Zealand broke away from Australia's landmass over 85 million years ago, yet people are still mixing us up. We only have like 3 species of dangerous spider, we don't have any snakes, whereas Australia has so many they have to list the top 10. Also, we don't put shrimp on the barbie one at a time. That's insanity, you just poured the whole thing in. Our two countries have what I would describe as a friendly rivalry. Yes, Australia is technically a continent, not a country, but Zealandia, aka Tasmantis, the landmass which New Zealand has actually risen up from, is also technically called a continent, even if it is almost entirely submerged. But Australia have actually tried to steal a bunch of our Kiwi creations. From pavlova, which is a type of cake made from meringue and cream and with a bunch of fruit sprinkled on top, that is really tasty, to the lamington and the lolly cake. They even tried to steal Russell Crowe and Lord. Of course, I'm being satirical here, in case you didn't know. God, I hope you did know. I'd be worried if you didn't know. But that's essentially our relationship with our closest cousin country. Now stop mixing us up. How dare you? How dare you? It's kiwi fruit, not kiwis, okay? The kiwi is a type of flightless bird native to New Zealand. It still actually has wings, they're just tiny now. The bird has 5 main species and has been used as an icon in New Zealand since the late 19th century. They forage carefully on the forest floor and are much heavier than typical birds of their size because instead of having hollow bones like most birds who fly, they actually have marrow like us, you know? You can't actually see my bones, but you get the idea, I'm sure. Unfortunately, their numbers have declined massively, from around 12 million Kiwis 2 centuries ago to just 68,000 in 2019. Now, I am a Kiwi. Not literally, obviously, I'm a human being, mostly. What does that even mean? At least informally, citizens of New Zealand are called Kiwis. Really, we're just called New Zealanders, but that's kinda meh. And we even have a fruit named after them, called Kiwi Fruit. At least that's what it's called here. Overseas, apparently they're just called Kiwis, which is okay, I guess. Except they're not actually native to our country. The Kiwi fruit is originally a type of gooseberry from China. But, I mean, to be fair, the resemblance is pretty close. Brown, fluffy, and small. Cute! New Zealand has 3 main islands. There's the North Island, and, well, you guessed it, the South Island. It's a pretty tough one, I know. And Stewart Island, which is the 3rd biggest, which I've never actually been to, but I've heard it's a great spot for fishing. The whole island is essentially one giant nature park. Some Kiwis still live there as well. Not the people, but the birds. I mean, there are like 400 people that live on the island permanently, but that's neither here nor there. You know what I'm saying, mate? In fact, you can actually see the Aurora Australis from here, which are the Southern Lights, if you didn't know. The South Island of New Zealand is the largest island of our country, home to the Southern Alps, off which come our largest glaciers, the beautiful west and east coast, home to the Pancake Rocks, the shaky city, Christchurch, Mount Cook, the Fiordland, Golden Bay where I was born, and so much more. If you come to New Zealand for the views and natural splendour, this is the place to come. Strangely enough, despite it being our largest landmass, it actually only houses about 23% of our population. The North Island, however, houses about 75% of our 4.8 million people. It's quite strange because it's a lot smaller. It's home to the Lake Taupo that I mentioned earlier, which was once that volcano that exploded, Hobbiton, Mount Taranaki, the old Kauri gum farms, 90 Mile Beach, and of course, New Zealand's capital, Wellington. There's an absolute ton of places and things that you can do to talk about, but for the sake of not boring you, I had to keep this short. We have over 3,000 glaciers. Yes, that's right, 3,000. The largest of which are Tasman, Hooker, Fox, Franz Josef, Mueller, and Murchison. Aren't they beautiful? However, a recent glaciological study has shown that since the 1970s, the collective mass of these glaciers has shrunk by almost a third. Further than that, by the turn of the century, they could be completely gone. New Zealand is seen as a fairly clean and green country, which it is, with about 80% of our electricity coming from renewable sources. We look good on paper. We do. But even here, with our relatively low emissions, we are experiencing the effects of a warming planet. The extensive studies from Lauren Vargo and others of her field show that these effects on our country could only have occurred with modern human influence. Here in New Zealand, a part of our patriotism is, or should be, for the land itself. If we are seen as leaders in this mass-scale battle to protect our planet from ourselves, well, then I fear for our future as a species. New Zealand, aka Aotearoa. Aotearoa. The first humans to arrive here in New Zealand were the Maori people, and in Te Reo, their language, the name for this country means Land of the Long White Cloud, which is very accurate. Because every time I look out that window, there's a really long white cloud going over the mountains. Always. It's always there. In Maori legends, the demigod Maui went fishing with his brothers one day. His waka boat, the Great South Island, he bled onto his fishing hook, crafted from the jawbone of his ancestor, and tossed it into the depths. He pulled a truly monstrous fish from the ocean. So massive, his brothers carved mountains and valleys from its flesh. This fish became the North Island, and so, according to legend, New Zealand came to be. The Maori people are indigenous to New Zealand. They arrived in about 1320 to 1350 on great sea walkers from eastern Polynesian islands. It has been theorized that before that they originated from somewhere near Taiwan in China. That, however, is still up for debate. Our ancient species, New Zealand, an ancient haven for animals, a lonely island isolated from everything except the ocean and the open air. Being so far from everything, it's only natural that a unique chain of evolutions occurred here. Giant moa towered above all other species of bird on the planet. At over 2 meters tall, they ruled the landscape. The Haast's eagle dominated the skies, the largest eagle to have ever existed. It could soar from the mountaintops, with wings up to 3 meters long, from tip to tip, so strong that it could carry children away from villages as prey. These, among dozens of other poor creatures, have fallen prey to human interference. However, there are plenty of unique creatures that have survived our destructive reign. The tuatara is a reptile that has been referred to as a living fossil. They have essentially existed for over 240 million years, with only minor evolutionary changes. They aren't fully grown until they're about 35 and can live to be over 100 years old. They can live longer than us. We have a type of parrot called a kea. It lives in the mountains and it's very intelligent. In fact, it's so intelligent that it will strip the rubber from the seals on your windows in your car. we have a species of giant snail, and the Weta, which you may have heard of because of Weta Workshop or Weta Digital, which are the filmmaking enterprises. It's a kind of giant cricket that lives inside caves and other dark places. Gold rush to fame. A lot of the towns in southern New Zealand were populated during and after the great many gold rushes that occurred here. Dunedin grew to be New Zealand's largest city during the Great Otago Gold Rush. Over 18,000 prospectors swelled the ranks of this region. From around 1861 to 1864, miners from Australia and China flocked into the country to try and strike it rich. In fact, the University of Otago was founded and started using the wealth from the Otago Gold Rush. But before all this, in the area where I was born, Golden Bay, back then it was named Massacre Bay because it's where the first interaction between Europeans and Maori happened. As you can guess from the name, it wasn't all that pretty. There was a surge of so much gold and people in a town called Collingwood that it was the first place to be suggested as the capital for New Zealand. Of course, you probably know that our capital is Wellington in the North Island. 3 Australian commissioners determined that Wellington's centrality would be a more correct place to have our capital. And I have to agree. Because shortly after that, the gold mines kind of went to the crapper. Our land and lamb. New Zealand is well known for its exports, mostly our dairy and lamb products. We have about 5.5 sheep here for every person. In 1982, the peak number was 22 sheep per person. In 2017 alone, the agricultural sector made $28 billion, most of that money coming from dairy and meat respectively. The biggest customers for these products, as always it seems, are Australia and China. Tourism is another massive part of our country's income. People come from all over the world to see New Zealand, and the numbers definitely show it. You guys from overseas bring in over $40 billion a year just from tourism. And I don't blame you. Here you can find just about every kind of natural biome you can think of within a day's drive. The ocean is always within reach. We have jungles, forests, alpine mountains, rolling green hills, swamps, lakes and rivers, waterfalls, hell, we even have a couple of tiny deserts. A diverse people. I am a 6th generation Kiwi. My ancestors were largely from Scotland, and the first few generations lived in Golden Bay, where I'm from as well. It's interesting. Before that, my blood goes way back to like around Denmark, Norway, and that sort of area. People have come here from all over the planet to live in New Zealand. From close by with Australian and Polynesian people to far away with Irish, British and Chinese. 70% of our residents are European, although that is to be expected from a British colony. Speaking of Britain, we actually still technically live under the English crown. Our flag still even has a Union Jack in the corner. Kiwis are known for their ingenuity. Our separation from the larger world may seem like a disadvantage, but it has bred generations of inventors. Ernest Rutherford, the first man to split the atom, came from New Zealand. He's the godfather of all nuclear physics. In fact, he was even the baron of the city that I live in for a few years. Not in my time. Yeah, a few years back. Us Kiwis invented the sport of bungee jumping, which involves jumping off a bridge with like a springy harness that sort of brings you back up again. I haven't done it. I don't like heights. We invented the jet boat, jogging, the first jetpack, disposable syringes, the beef Wellington, instant coffee, McLaren cars, the electric fence, the referee whistle, the Zorb wheel, chip seal, we'd call that tar seal, the tranquilizer gun, the egg beater, and apparently a man named Richard Pearce was the first man to fly. 9 months before the Wright brothers, he flew his plane made of bamboo and scrap metal that he made in his backyard. This guy's a farmer. And he flew for 140 glorious meters. And then he crashed. So, in the end, it's safe to say that the Wright brothers weren't the first men to fly, but they were the first to do it right. I am immensely proud to belong to my country of New Zealand. For such a small island in the middle of nowhere, we have such a rich culture and history. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe you learned a few things along the way too. I encourage you to make your own video on how amazing your country is. I would love to hear what your people have achieved throughout history as well. If you did enjoy, please leave a like, and consider subscribing to watch more videos from Kahura. Share this video with someone who might find it interesting, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys out there. I did have to come back to turn everything off, so yeah. Goodbye.